welcome back everyone from the Wall Street Silver community. We have a special guest. I was with him the other day. Robert, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we're gonna get right into it because our audience knows who you are because we're pretty big fans of you. So Lee, you want to get right into it and ask Robert some questions?
Well, I'm sure there's some people who are going to be watching this that don't know who you are. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us like a brief intro as to who you are, what you do, your website, and everything else.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've written and covered precious metals and the economy sectors here for about 12 years. I wrote a book about 11 years ago called Drop Shadow, The Truth About the Economy. That was after the last financial crisis, and I wanted to figure out what was going on. So I just dove right in the middle of it and started figuring things out. A couple of years ago, we started our website, GoldSilverPros.com, to focus on the precious metal space. And we've expanded that out into social media. We have a really big YouTube community as well. And so we just really, we cover why you want to own precious metals. We provide education into that sector. And, we welcome all aspects of that movement. I know a lot of the millennials have started to get into this. We've had people that have never touched a precious metal in their life get into this. And it's been a lot of fun.
I'm sure things have evolved since you got into it, right?
Oh, yeah.
How has your perception of precious metals in the market and the fundamental case to own them changed or evolved in that time?
I would say over the last 12 years, it's gotten stronger because the main thing you look at when you want to look at precious metals ownership, especially if we're going from a gold perspective, is really wealth preservation, preservation against inflation of the dollar, preservation against if we have another market crash. I'll use a couple examples. Back when we had the tech crash in 2000, I was in a lot of Janus funds. Janus at the time was considered sort of the holy grail of the mutual fund complex. I was in it and lost 40% within 6 months.
Wow, crazy.
And, against my broker's wishes, pulled everything out and said, I'm done with this stupid, market, and said a lot of flowery words along the way. And then and then we had the 2008 crisis, and that was the mortgage crisis, and the debt market was blowing up. So you've had a stock crisis, a mortgage crisis, two big ones within 8 to 9 years of each other. And that's when I woke up and said, wait, what's going on? So I think from gold's perspective, it's long-term wealth preservation. I think silver is a very special case in which it has been money for 6,000 years, but also in this economy, we're now seeing it really power the space economy and power the tech economy. So it's from an industrial perspective, it is so important that it's really got, two very valuable use cases.
Now, Robert, do you see hyperinflation coming? What do you see with the US dollar? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so when I started researching all this, I got into something called Austrian economics, and they're what I call like classical economists, or they go by a lot of names, but it is the study of fiat money and how fiat money eventually dies. And there's something in there called the crack up boom, and the crack up boom is when you have that kind of final, the fiat currency kind of rises one last time and then it dies, and the whole thing kind of collapses. Mm-hmm. And that has to do with how it's tied into the debt system and stuff. But, Austrian economists believe that all fiat currencies eventually die the same way. And yeah, I do think the US dollar will eventually hyperinflate. I think we're some time away from that, but we're, relatively speaking, we're really close to it.
We were fortunate enough. We had actually Jeff Deist from the Mises Institute on
awesome.
A couple of weeks ago. Yeah. So we've delved into Austrian economics, just a tiny, tiny sliver. That said, we actually we were fortunate enough just to interview Bill Fleckenstein. And he made the point that things are a little bit different now because all currencies are kind of following the same game at the same time.
Yes.
And, that's an obvious point. So do you think that's going to delay any kind of collapse in any of the currencies? I mean, we've seen the Brazilian real, the Turkish lira collapse at different times, the Venezuelan currency. What's your take on that?
We recently had Fernando Aguirre, who lived in Argentina during the first recent Argentinian currency crisis in 2000 on one of our conferences. And he gave his experience of what happened when the Argentinian currency blew up, and how that literally created a grid down type of situation where people are scrambling for food, didn't have power, didn't have water. It was a horrible situation. And I think, to answer your question, yes, Bill Fleckenstein's correct. All currencies are fiat now. It's the first time in history. They're not back, not on the gold standard. They're all purely fiat. We have this purely central banking model for the first time in human history. And that muddies the waters because if you look at something like the dollar index, you're not looking at the strength of the dollar, you're looking at the strength of the dollar relative to other fiat currencies. But that doesn't tell you how good the other fiat currencies are. And so, when it blows up, I think it's going to be spectacular. It's going to be like a nuclear bomb. They're all going to blow up at once because if you look at the currencies and the banks that issue them, they're all tied together. They all invest in each other. They all have each other's stocks. They all issue debt against each other. So when one goes, they tend to all go. And going back to the Argentinian one, that's why the IMF bailed them out. IMF is one of these international banking agencies that gave them a big loan because they know if Argentina blows up, then the next one blows up, then it's like dominoes, right? And so they're all scrambling to protect themselves. But at the end of the day, it eventually has to go. I mean, these systems have never worked in human history, and I don't see that changing.
Rob, are you currently invested in any cryptos?
I'm not currently invested in cryptos. I know there's a huge Bitcoin movement out there. From my perspective, as pure currencies, the current generation of cryptos are pretty flawed. Mm-hmm. I do understand why people get into them from a safe haven perspective because they're trying to stay out the central banking system and they're very much not tied to the central banking system.
Just buy silver.
Yeah, I'm very much a PM guy, and I'm a tech guy too. I have 25 years in the technology industry. I have a master's in cybersecurity, so I really understand the cryptos at a level a lot of people don't. I can read the white papers and understand, how they're developing and what the algorithms are doing, and I just find all sorts of concerns in them. I love the idea of having independent currencies to the central bank currencies, but I'm not sold on this current generation.
Do you think blockchains are safe? Since you have 25 years in tech, do you think a blockchain is safe?
Not in its current iteration.
Okay.
Because, I mean, the problems with the blockchain, it's not necessarily the blockchain. It's kind of like the discussion of encryption. Nothing's wrong with encryption. It's how it's implemented and how the keys are stored. That's how you break the blockchain. You go rob the exchanges. You go rob the places that are storing the money. So the blockchain itself is somewhat secure. The bigger problem, it's the exchanges that aren't secure, and it's where you store it, right? But the biggest problem with the blockchain is they're not efficient. They're horribly inefficient. If you go to the proof of work systems, which is the main way that Bitcoin is mined, you're talking exorbitant amounts of energy. It's not a green technology at all. It's the exact opposite. And and their capacity to handle transactions is really small. So you can't expand Bitcoin out past a very small group of users, or else it falls apart.
So with your discussion about Argentina, I mean, what do you think in a grid down situation with cryptos? I mean, are they just toast?
Well, in a grid down situation, cryptos become fiat because the only way that you could then trade your cryptos is on a piece of paper. So you do a QR code or something along those lines and you trade, or you have a portable hard drive and hopefully you have a battery and you go over to your friend's house and you plug it in and you do it,
Just seems so inefficient.
Yeah. You might as well have dollar bills or seashells or trading eggs.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, whatever. To me, it's digital wampum, but
yeah,
to each his own.
Now, Rob, what's the most important message that you can get across to the youth of today who are investing into precious metals and everything like that? What's your message to them, Rob?
Man, I would say go and study the history of currencies and follow Aristotle's 5 laws of money. It's very easy to find online. And basically Aristotle describes perfect money and the 5 features of it. Basically, it has to be fungible. It has to survive. It can't burn or melt or, be, like a crypto when everything goes offline, it loses its utility. Mm-hmm. It has to be all those things. And whatever fits those 5 categories is what you can use as money and will be money during your entire lifetime. And the best things that fit in that category are the precious metals. They always have.
That's a great answer. That's a great. So Aristotle said that exactly, right?
Yeah, he philosophized over a lot of things, but like everybody, he covered finance and money, and he studied. He's a very, very bright guy, obviously. Studied currencies over time, and he said, these are the 5 characteristics of currencies that last throughout time, and he was basically describing precious metals.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, do you have a timeline or a date on where you see all of these fiat currencies, like the the US dollar, the Canadian dollar, and the euro dollar? Do you see a timeline on when they do collapse or implode?
Well, that's very difficult because when you have a system where the central banks are supporting each other, they can drag it out. And all hyperinflations are not if you follow Austrian economics, hyperinflations are not the result of people spending their money faster. It's not velocity of money. It's a loss of confidence in the money. Mm-hmm. It's when people say, you know what, this is toilet paper, essentially. And that's when the hyperinflations occur. So really that's up to us. I anticipate as the Silversqueeze movement and all of these other movements into honest money strengthen, that will weaken the fiat currencies. And that's when they're going to fail. It's when the public loses confidence in them. Specifically for the dollar, people aren't buying US bonds anymore, which backs the dollar. And China, Russia, the other BRIC nations, the Middle Eastern nations are doing non-dollar oil contracts, non-dollar trade contracts.
Wow.
They're doing it in gold. They're doing it in Chinese currency. They're doing it in Iranian currency. And the more that happens, and the further the dollar gets away from that petrodollar trade, the less relevance the dollar has. And so I think the writing's on the wall. There is already a loss of confidence in the dollar. We just haven't seen it in the US. But we'll be the last to see it because that's going on the other rest of the world. All those dollars will flood back because we're the only ones that are going to demand them. And that's when the public will realize, because you're going to have high inflation, they're going to realize the dollar's not worth it. And then it's going to go. And when it goes, it's going to be fast. The history of currencies collapsing is very, very, very fast. We're talking within months of when that happens. And the stage is being set internationally for people dumping the dollar. So I don't have an exact date, but there are milestones. Some of the milestones have already been passed. We continue to watch those milestones, and as they occur, and we continue to write about them on our newsletter, and we talk about them on our YouTube channel.
Now,
sorry.
Yeah, you go. No, you go.
I was going to say, so from my impression, just following the Fed and just the news and the World Economic Forum's come out with this great reset. To me, it looks like they're trying to head this off at the pass. Come out with the digital dollar, come out with the digital currencies, and I also believe that those are designed to kind of have more control over price discovery and everything else. So, what's your take? I mean, do you think that the dollar is going to hyperinflate away, and they're just going to implement the digital dollar and maybe back it by something? Where do you see all this playing out?
I think when the central banks are ready, they're going to let the currencies die. The only thing keeping the currencies alive right now are the central banks. When they pull the support, it's over. And right now they're racing to get to the digital currencies because the public is losing faith, right? It's a race condition. Mm-hmm. They're racing public perception. That's why, Powell comes out and says, I don't believe in gold. Gold and Bitcoin, are inferior to the dollar. He's made comments like that recently, the Fed chairman.
Well, they're poison to central bankers. So,
yeah. But I think they will, when the digital currencies are ready, they will let the dollar die, the pound die, the euro die, and they're going to try to get people on the digital currencies.
How do you see them getting people to have faith in these new digital currencies?
Oh, they'll force it on you.
No, I know, but I mean, they forced the dollar on us, and we're losing faith in it. So, how are they going to establish some credibility for digital money?
That's a good question.
They're trying. Here's what I think. They're trying to build up the legitimacy of the private cryptos, so that people will get into the crypto movements. So that by the time you get there, because if you think about it, it takes about a generation for people to switch money. Mm-hmm. So the baby boomers right now, they don't give a flying crap about cryptos. So as they move out of power and you get these new generations in, if they can brainwash them into the cryptos, that's your transition. So it's just a matter of time and them pumping up the cryptos. But when they do it, when they go to Fed coin, the digital dollar, the digital euro, they're going to say, well, you can still have Bitcoin, but you can't pay taxes. You can't buy groceries. You can't buy a car. We can only do that with the national currency. And what's going to happen to the private coins is their utility is going to go, the bottom is going to be swept out from under them.
With that happening, where do you see precious metals playing a role? Because if you can't transact in anything but Fed coin or whatever country you're in, is it just going to be a black market? Do you think they're going to be able to allow sales of precious metals in exchange for Fed coin, etc.?
There's already a black market to me, because if you look at the difference in spot price of silver to the spot price to what you actually pay for silver, to me, That's the real market. You can call it a black market. You can call it a whatever market you want. But if you go to eBay or you go to an online coin dealer, you're paying $8 an ounce over spot for silver. And gold, you're looking at Gold Eagles, $160, $180. I mean, the premiums have never been that high.
That's messed.
So I do think a black market. I do think the central banks are capitalizing their balance sheets with gold. If you look at international regulations from Basel, it's called Basel III. It comes out of that part of Europe. They write international banking laws, and they have made gold equivalent to cash on balance sheets where it's held in true allocated form. And there's a lot of rules around that. But essentially, they're saying central banks and banks, go buy your gold. That's going to be your base asset. It's equal to cash. So when the cashes die, gold is at the bottom of the bank's balance sheet. And that's what everything is going to be built on. All the crypto coins, all that stuff is going to be based upon gold. So gold will be the center of the financial system. And so if you're a private individual and you hold gold, you're going to have the same power as the big banks. That purchasing power is going to be immense. It's going to revalue and it's going to be immense. Because if you think about it, when the bonds die and the currencies die, what's left on their balance sheets to have value? It's the stock of the other banks, and it's going to be gold. So that price of gold's not going to be $1,700 an ounce. We're talking multiple $1,000s an ounce to recapitalize that banking system.
Now, Rob, do you see because we were talking a little bit earlier, if the fiat currency crashes, it crashes real quick.
Yes.
Now, do you see the U.S. going to war, or do you see them to keep that dollar alive? Do you see them going to war?
This is a very complicated answer, but yes. You see, in the last couple of years of the Trump administration, you saw the fight of China. The reason the fight of China is not only because they're winning the trade battle, they make more from that than we do, right?
Yeah.
But they're building a military. Their military news has come out in the last couple of months that they have almost as many aircraft carriers. They have the same technology in the stealth fighters. They have better missiles. So China is now almost on the level of the U.S. China at this point is positioned to hold a war with the U.S. And if they partner up with Russia and Brazil and all those countries, then the U.S., the U.S. all of a sudden doesn't have military dominance. And so, yes, typically when you have economic crashes as big as the one that's going to happen when the currencies crash, you have war. And the scary thing is that China and Russia have been positioning for this for the last 20, 30 years. So I do think there could be a war element to it. I'm not a fatalist in thinking we're going to nuke each other off the planet, but I do think that there are going to be conflicts. Right now, there's proxy conflicts, and the proxy is the Middle East. They're fighting over Syria right now, and that's a proxy for what could come later.
That's a great answer. Lee, do you have a question?
Sure. Let's talk about other precious metals besides silver. I mean, in relationship to silver, do you see silver outperforming by a large measure gold and platinum, palladium, rhodium? I mean, do you actually see silver going the way rhodium did a few years ago?
Well, I wrote an article series for Seeking Alpha back in 2011. And I said it was a 5-piece on gold and silver and their eventual where they're going to land. The last one was focused on silver. And I said, I think silver one day is going to be worth an ounce of gold.
Wow.
I think it'll become parity because the poor man, everyday man, can't necessarily afford an ounce of gold, especially when it gets really expensive, which it will in dollar terms. They're going to buy silver. If you add industrial demand to silver there's not enough silver in this world. And so silver is going to be so valuable, both from an industry perspective and a monetary perspective, that it will be as valuable or more valuable for gold, at least for a while. So I think silver's moonshoot when it gets here is going to be more powerful than what you saw in rhodium even.
Wow.
And as far as rhodium, platinum, and palladium go, those are precious metals, but they haven't over time been considered monetary metals. They're more used in industry. So catalytic conversions, jewelry. There's some investment demand for jewelry. If you buy, white gold, a lot of times that's regular gold mixed with palladium. I bought my wife a rhodium-based ring.
Nice.
Years ago. So there's some jewelry demand there, but those are industrial. So those fluctuate with industrial demand. So if the world economy is going good, those prices go up.
Okay. So there's a double play there on those kinds of metals, I would imagine.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Rob, what are your goals or plans for GoldSilverPros for the next 2 to 3 years or 5 years, or what are your personal plans and goals?
So we're an educational service. We hope to educate people through our social media and our free newsletter. We have started by viewer demand a paid newsletter, which has a quarterly. It's called the Golden Quarterly, and we're about to start releasing a monthly newsletter as well. That's going to be called the Contrarian Investor.
Where can we find that?
If you go to GoldSilverPros.com and you can subscribe there, that's the paid service.
Okay.
We also there for people that sign up for that who want to learn. Get Gold Silver Pros University, which is a catalog of 40 articles and videos that teach you about the precious metals and the markets and the economy. So if you're new getting into this and you're trying to figure out your way, Gold Silver Pros University is a great way to do that. That's why we designed it.
Nice.
What's your view in terms of how best to invest in this and prepare yourself for whatever may happen? I mean, do you prefer bullion, ETFs, mining stocks? Any particular type of bullion?
I think that's a personal answer depending on your circumstance and where you're currently positioned. But I'll give you some general. I'd say even if you believe in the stock and bond markets, research shows if you add 20% gold to your portfolio, you have a more stable return over any 20 to 30 to 40 year time period. So even if you're a generalist and you still want, 401k, your stocks and bonds, still put money into gold because that gold stabilizes. Beyond that, in my opinion, I'm out of any stock, any bond, and I won't go back in until the big reset. I won't touch them.
Yeah.
I hold physical precious metals stored safely in a safe place. And
where?
Keep your secrets. Don't say where it is. But then I also, on top of that, I have some farmland. Farmland does well no matter what the economy is because you need meat and vegetable products. That always does well. And then on top of that, after I make those two core investments, I invest in the precious metal stocks. One quick note on precious metal stocks. They fluctuate. They're more speculative, but when gold and silver go up, they go up more. There's a leverage to that. So if you want to learn about that, you can come to my website. We've got lots of tutorials on how to get into the mining stocks.
What advice would you give someone who's in their 20s, 30s about just career focus?
Yeah.
Because the world is going to be very different.
Learn skills that the world will need. My master's is in cybersecurity because I saw 10 years ago the cyber wars were coming and I was right. And that's done very well for me from a professional capacity. But beyond that, learn skills, learn things that will be useful to other people. Things that no matter what happens in the economy will be valuable. I would even say, if you want to go live on a farm and learn how to farm, that's not a bad idea because people are always going to need food. In a professional capacity, do something that people are always going to need. Go into medicine, go into engineering. But if you want to get in the precious metal sector, I will tell you right now, there is so much opportunity to be an advocate for precious metals. You can work with mining companies. You can work with precious metals companies. They need people. And you can get experience that way, which will help you understand how to build your portfolio.
That's pretty smart too, going into mining companies and learning from them and learning from people like yourself. So I think that's what the younger generation needs, is just to get all that knowledge, which is really, really nice. So you just said you're not in any stocks or ETFs until the great reset comes. Do you have a time set, or do you have a time when the great reset will come? A lot of people are saying 2022 June.
Yeah, that June date came around because of some Basel regulations, and without getting too far into it, it changes what the banks have to have on their balance sheet to be considered solvent. And it's more strict. So it's basically like they gave the banks 14 years from the last financial crisis to get their stuff together. And so in June of this year, some of those regulations really hit in earnest, and it's looking like the banks may not be able to make it. So I think in June, we're going to have some real truth come out about how weak the banks are, how much bad debt they have, lack of good quality assets like gold, even cash. Right now, cash is better than holding debt.
Wow.
I think we're going to figure that out. I think that will spur some additional work in the banking sector, but I think it's going to be one of the dominoes. When I talked about milestones earlier, when June hits and we figure out they're not as strong as they should be, that's another milestone in the death of the current system. the way, if you look at World Economic Forum, they have the Great Reset on their website. They're talking about going to the cryptos. They're talking about going into technocracy, technical rule. The Great Reset, I think, will happen is if that's going to fail, their systems will fail, and it will be the wise investor now that's positioning themselves in the precious metals that's going to do well during that time.
So, Rob,
do you think? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go, Lee. You go, Lee.
I was going to say, do you think? I mean, from my perspective, I started following the precious metal sector back in the late 1990s. Things have obviously evolved, but my perspective now is there's just so much more awareness, and partially thank you to the whole crypto community for kind of exposing fiat currency.
Yes.
Do you think that this mass awareness I think it's going to grow significantly, but do you think that's going to stymie the central bank's plan as to, what they've been doing with the Great Reset and everything else?
Yeah, I think the genie's out of the bottle. I think the same tools they were going to use for technocracy, the internet, those technical controls have also enabled people. It's like the new Renaissance. It's like when the Gutenberg press came out and all of a sudden there were books and people could figure out, oh, hey, this is how stuff has worked for the last 500 years.
I always use that analogy with the Gutenberg press because I think it's just so fitting and it's so true.
Yeah, the internet's a new Gutenberg press, but everything's moving so fast. If you look at the new generations, the millennials and Gen X was my generation, we built a lot of the technology. The millennials and the Gen Zers are putting that to use better than anyone. And the way information spreads, I don't think they can put the genie back in the bottle. I think, the momentum is on the side of people wanting to educate themselves and get out of this system and find alternatives.
What alternatives do you think exist? Hard currency?
Hard currency. I do think that there could be a crypto, an independent, privately owned crypto that once they make improvements to the algorithms, make it a little safer, a little more consistent, that second generation of crypto, as long as it's privately held, privately promulgated, could be, that could be the way that you transfer value over time and distance. And then you hold your hard currencies to back up, that backs that up. Because we do need something to facilitate trade. You can't, it's really hard to ship a lot of gold back and forth.
Sure.
But so eventually a private crypto. I would stay away from any bank run crypto. Those are not designed to help the people.
Now, Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We still have a lot more questions, but we have one of the questions from the community members is, when are you going to join the Wall Street Silver community?
I'm actually joined in the Wall Street Silver.
What's your username?
Nice.
So I've had a Reddit account for a while. I have gotten so busy that I actually had to hire somebody to help me do my social media.
Nice.
But we have a plan to address Wall Street Silver community. So we're running a Wall Street Silver playlist on YouTube. We have a strategy for addressing Wall Street Silver community on Reddit. We're going to do that more.
Nice.
Because we see it as being so important. Right now, the backbone of the silver community is going through Wall Street Silver. You guys have you've captured what we've been trying to talk about for 10 years and then weaponized it and then spread it out everywhere.
And the nice thing, Robert, is we could put Gold Silver Pros right in the community where you could find your YouTube links. Sure. So it's really, really nice where we can find more information, because that's what all Wall Street Silver is. It's entertainment, information, due diligence, memes, and then just a bunch of great people. Now, Lee, do you have any more questions for Rob?
Sure. My own experience in the precious metals community, having started following this back in the late 1990s, you always felt kind of like an oddball because no one invested in this stuff except maybe your grandparents or whatever.
Right.
Have you gone through that same evolution from the time you got involved in it?
Yeah, one of our taglines from the video we did earlier this week with you guys was, "This is not your father's silver market." So what we try to do is we try to educate and say, hey, this has been around for a long time, but there's a new generation getting into it. So we're trying to position as mentors and just guides. And anybody comes to us and wants more information, we're happy to connect, network, share as much as possible. I think that's what we have to do, is just continue to share, continue to help each other out and build this community.
We have to thank Ivan for bringing us all together. I have to say that.
No, it's not me.
That was awesome.
It's the community, man. It's bigger.
Oh,
than
yeah,
Ivan.
but you know what? You had that brilliant stroke of genius after the Wall Street Bets GME thing, and it
Yeah.
It really just gelled everything. And I think the whole silver community appreciates that.
Well, thank you guys. Now, Robert, are you teaching your kids and your family members the importance of precious metals? That's really important.
Yeah, so I have a funny story because I'm sort of the precious metals guy in the family, right?
Nice.
And they get to hear about it all the time, and so some of it's rubbed off. My daughter's actually an actress. She's in a couple of TV shows now.
No way.
Yeah, she's in Walker, which is a remake of Walker, Texas Ranger, and she's booked a part in one of the Walking Dead series.
What?
Nice.
That's incredible.
So,
congratulations to her.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I told her, I said, you get, helping her manage her money because she's, a minor still. I said, a certain percentage of money spent on whatever you want. The rest goes into precious metals. And she's like, I'm down with it.
Nice.
So we've got precious metals account set up for her, and she invests every time she gets, a paycheck for her work. And that's building a really solid base for her. So yeah, I've taught my kids that. And I think that's a lesson they're going to take the rest of their life.
Wow. Well, we appreciate you an incredibly amount, Robert, for even coming to join us here at Wall Street Silver. Lee, do you have any last questions for Rob before he goes?
No, I just want to thank you because this has been a great discussion. I think we've touched on a lot of areas I've kind of wanted to touch on, but haven't had the right guest yet. But this was good.
Now, where's Robert? Before you go, the exact website, just so everyone can find it, and we'll put it in the link in the description.
Yep, it's GoldSilverPros.com. And if you want to reach out to me personally, it's Robert@GoldSilverPros.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Robert. It's been an absolute pleasure. We hope to do this again soon, hopefully next month. And then, yeah, we'll go from there. Thank you, everyone from the Wall Street Silver community, and we'll talk to you all soon.
All right, thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
All right, take care, everyone.